Bellerophon, Pegasus, and the Chimaera. Once in the old times, for all the strange things which I tell you about happened long before anybody can remember, a fountain gushed out of a hillside in the marvelous land of Greece. One day, a handsome young man named Bellerophon drew near the fountain. In his hand he held a bridle, studded with brilliant gems and adorned with a golden bit. Seeing a country fellow and a young child near the fountain, he paused and asked, "Will you be kind enough to tell me whether this fountain has any name?" "Yes, it is called the Fountain of Pyrene," answered the child. "And my grandmother says it is a magical fountain, for it was once a beautiful woman who melted away into tears when her son was killed by the arrows of the goddess Artemis." "So, this then is Pyrene. I have come from a faraway country to find this very spot." "Pray, have you lost a horse?" asked the country fellow. "I see you carry a bridle in your hand." "I have lost no horse," said Bellerophon with a smile, "but I happen to be seeking a famous one, which, as wise people have informed me, must be found hereabouts, if anywhere. Do you know whether the winged horse Pegasus still haunts the Fountain of Pyrene? A snow-white steed with beautiful silvery wings, as wild and as swift as any eagle that soared into the clouds. They say he used to be seen drinking the delicious water and rolling himself upon the soft grass." The country fellow only laughed. Bellerophon turned to the child. "Well, my child, I suppose you have often seen the winged horse?" "That I have," answered the child very readily. "I saw him yesterday, and many times before. I often come here to play, and sometimes, when I look down into the water, I see the image of the winged horse. I wish he would come down and take me on his back, but if I so much as stir to look at him, he flies away out of sight." Putting his faith in the child, Bellerophon haunted about the Fountain of Pyrene, continually on the watch, hoping he should see either the reflected image of the winged horse or the marvelous reality. Now Bellerophon was one of the bravest youths in the world, and desired nothing so much as to do some valiant deed, such as would make all mankind admire and love him. In those days, the only way for a young man to distinguish himself was by fighting battles, either with enemies of his country, or with wicked giants, or with troublesome dragons, or with wild beasts. King Iobates had proposed to Bellerophon that he go and fight the Chimaera, a hateful monster which everybody else was afraid of. Bellerophon hesitated not a minute, but assured the king that he would either slay this dreaded Chimaera or perish in the attempt. But as the monster was so swift, he thought he would never win the victory by fighting on foot. The wisest thing he could do was to get the fleetest horse that could anywhere be found. On advice from a seer, he spent the night in the temple of Athena, and she appeared to him in his dreams, saying, "Put this golden bit into the mouth of Pegasus, the winged horse, and he will go whithersoever you choose." One day, after many spent at the fountain, the faithful child whispered, "There, Bellerophon, there is an image in the water. There, sinking lightly down out of that cloud. Bellerophon, do you not see that it is no bird?" Bellerophon caught the child in his arms and shrank back into the shrubbery. "It is he. It is the winged horse, Pegasus." Downward came Pegasus, nearer and nearer, flying in circles, which grew narrower and narrower as he gradually approached the earth. Then, with a last sweep of his silver wings, with so light a pressure as hardly to bend the grass about the fountain, he alighted, and stooping his wild head, began to drink. After thus drinking to his heart's content, he began to roll over and over on the ground, and then when he had enough of rolling over and over, Pegasus, like any other horse, put out his forelegs in order to rise from the ground. Suddenly, Bellerophon darted from his hiding place and leaped astride. Yes, there he sat, on the back of the winged horse. But what a bound did Pegasus make when he first felt the weight of mortal man. Before he had time to draw a breath, Bellerophon found himself 500 feet aloft and still shooting upward. The winged horse snorted and trembled with anger and terror. Upward he went, up, until he plunged into the cold, misty bosom of a cloud. Then out of the heart of the cloud, Pegasus shot down like a thunderbolt, as if he meant to dash both himself and his rider headlong against a rock. He put down his head between his legs and turned a somerset 2 miles above the earth. He fluttered his wings so wildly that one of the silver feathers was shaken out and fell to earth and was picked up by the child. But at last, Bellerophon clapped the golden bit of the enchanted bridle between the winged steed's jaws. No sooner was this done than the bridle worked its magic. Pegasus became as manageable as if he had taken food all his life out of Bellerophon's hand. Now, while Pegasus had been doing his utmost to shake Bellerophon off his back, he had flown a very long distance, and they had come within sight of a lofty mountain. They had, in fact, come to the mountainous part of the country Lycia, home of the terrible Chimaera. Being now so near their journey's end, Pegasus flew lower. Peeping over the edge of a cloud, Bellerophon looked down into the shadowy vales. At first there appeared to be nothing remarkable to see, unless it were the 3 spires of smoke which issued from the mouth of a cavern and clambered sullenly into the atmosphere. The smoke had an ugly, sulphurous, stifling scent, which caused Pegasus to snort and Bellerophon to sneeze. They could see the ruins of houses that had been burnt, and here and there the carcasses of dead cattle, strewn about the pastures where they had been feeding. Oh, what mischief, and what mischief, and what mischief this wicked Chimaera has done with its flaming breath, said Bellerophon. But where can the monster be? On looking down into the cavern, Bellerophon saw something. He made a sign to the winged horse. They sank slowly through the air until they were scarcely more than a man's height above the rocky bottom of the valley. Bellerophon beheld a heap of strange and terrible creatures curled up within the cavern. Their bodies lay so close together that Bellerophon and Pegasus could not distinguish them apart. But judging by their heads, one of these creatures was a huge snake, the second a fierce lion, and the third an ugly goat. Bellerophon had found out the Chimaera's cavern. The snake, the lion, and the goat were but one monster, and the 3 spires of smoke came from the nostrils of the 3 heads. Before Bellerophon had time to consider what to do next, the monster flung itself out of the cavern and sprang straight towards him, with its immense claws extended and its snaky tail twisting itself behind. But the winged horse was not to be caught so. In the twinkling of an eye, he was up aloft, halfway to the clouds, snorting with anger. The Chimaera raised itself, with its talons pawing, its 3 heads sputtering fire at Pegasus and his rider. But Pegasus darted down a slant, as swift as the flight of an arrow, right towards the Chimaera's 3-fold head. As horse and rider came within arm's length, Bellerophon made a cut at the monster. It was carried onward by his steed. Wheeling round, he perceived that he had cut the goat's head almost off, so that it dangled downward, quite dead. "Well done, my brave Pegasus," cried Bellerophon. "Another stroke like that, and we will stop either its hissing or its roaring." So again they rode, arrows straight at the heads, and with another cut, Bellerophon stopped the roaring. At last, there was only the monstrous snake's head, but it was twice as fierce and venomous as ever before. This time, as Pegasus and Bellerophon approached, the Chimaera gave a spring, and flinging itself upon poor Pegasus, clung round him and tied up its snaky tail into a knot. Up flew Pegasus, higher, 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 while still the monster kept its hold. Bellerophon, turning about, found himself face to face with the ugly grimness of the Chimaera. But the Chimaera was so mad and wild with pain that it did not guard itself. Bellerophon thrust his sword up to the hilt into its cruel heart. Thus it fell out of the sky all aflame, and it being nightfall before it reached the earth, was taken for a shooting star or comet. But at early sunrise, some cottagers were going to their labor, and saw to their astonishment several acres of ground strewn with black ashes. In the middle of the field, there was a heap of whitened bones, a great deal higher than a haystack. Bellerophon bent forward and kissed Pegasus while the tears stood in his eyes. "Back now, my beloved steed," said he, "back to the fountain of Pyrene." When their feet touched earth, Bellerophon said, "Where is that gentle child who used to keep me company, and never lost faith, and never was weary of gazing into the fountain?" "Here I am, dear Bellerophon," said the child softly. "I returned," said Bellerophon, "so that together we can give Pegasus his liberty." So saying, he slipped off the enchanted bridle from the head of the marvelous steed. But Pegasus rested his head on Bellerophon's shoulder and would not be persuaded to take flight. "Well then," said Bellerophon, caressing the airy horse, "thou shalt be with me as long as thou wilt." Then Bellerophon embraced the gentle child and set off to tell King Iobates that the Chimaera was destroyed.